The sound of my mother's gasp still echoes in my mind 25 years later. "No, no, this can't be happening," she whispered, staring at what used to be our rundown rental house in Cicero, Illinois. Patricia had just returned from her European adventure, expecting to find her abandoned 15-year-old son exactly where she left him 4 months earlier. Instead, she found something that shattered every assumption she'd made about abandoning me. With nothing but 5 crumpled dollar bills and a refrigerator containing expired milk and moldy cheese. That devastating July morning burns in my memory like a brand. I was sitting at our scratched kitchen table, spooning cereal from a chipped bowl, when Patricia announced she was leaving for Europe with Marcus. The smooth-talking insurance salesman had swept into our lives 3 months earlier, promising my mother adventures she'd only dreamed about during her double shifts at Murphy's Diner. Our 2-bedroom rental house told the story of our struggles in peeling wallpaper and water stains. The air conditioning had broken in May, and our landlord, Dave Kowalski, showed no interest in fixing it. Every surface seemed to cry out our poverty: the secondhand furniture with sagging cushions, the television that required manual channel changing, the bathroom faucet that dripped constantly, no matter how tightly you turned the handle. After my father died in that construction accident 3 years earlier, Patricia had worked herself to exhaustion, trying to keep us afloat. She'd leave at 5 in the morning for the breakfast shift, return home long enough to change uniforms, then head back for the dinner rush. Most nights she'd collapse on the couch, still wearing her grease-stained apron, too tired to even remove her orthopedic shoes. Marcus changed everything with his promises of European capitals, romantic dinners, and freedom from responsibility. He drove a flashy red Camaro that seemed impossibly glamorous compared to our rusted Honda Civic. Patricia started spending her tips on new clothes instead of groceries, talking dreamily about Paris cafes and Roman fountains. "Ernest, you're 15, now practically a man," she said that morning, not meeting my eyes as she folded clothes into a borrowed suitcase. "You're mature enough to handle things while I'm gone. This is my once-in-a-lifetime chance for real happiness." She pressed 5 crumpled dollar bills into my palm, the paper soft from countless hands. "I'll send money as soon as we get settled," she promised, already looking toward the door, where Marcus waited with the engine running. "Take care of yourself, sweetheart." The screen door slammed behind her, and I watched through the window as the Camaro disappeared down 51st Street. The silence in the house felt different, somehow heavier and more permanent than her usual absences. For the first 3 days, I maintained my normal routine. I made peanut butter sandwiches from our dwindling supplies and told myself she'd call soon. The $5 bought me a loaf of bread and a jar of generic peanut butter from the corner store. I drank tap water and rationed the food like I was preparing for a siege. By day 4, panic started creeping in. I called Patricia's cell phone every hour, listening to it ring endlessly before going to voicemail. Her cheerful, recorded message mocked me. "Hi, you've reached Patricia. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you." Mrs. Henderson from next door started asking questions when she noticed Patricia's car missing from our driveway for 3 consecutive days. The elderly widow had always been friendly in a distant way, offering polite waves when we passed on the sidewalk. Now she lingered by her mailbox, watching our house with obvious curiosity. "Where's your mother been, Ernest?" she asked on Thursday evening as I watered our dying tomato plants with a rusty watering can. "Haven't seen her Honda around lately?" I manufactured elaborate lies about Patricia picking up extra shifts at different diners across the city. Mrs. Henderson nodded politely, but her eyes showed skepticism. Mr. Rodriguez from the other side started paying attention too, slowing his lawn mowing whenever he passed our shared fence line. On day 5, desperation drove me to borrow Mrs. Henderson's phone under the pretense of mine being broken. When I dialed Patricia's number from her kitchen, my mother answered immediately with a laugh I barely recognized. "Hello." Her voice sounded light, carefree, nothing like the exhausted woman who'd left me 5 days earlier. "Mom, it's me, Ernest. I've been calling and calling." "Oh, honey," she exclaimed, but her tone carried the artificial brightness of someone who'd been drinking. Background noise suggested a crowded restaurant or bar with multiple conversations and clinking glasses. "We're having the most incredible time. Marcus just ordered champagne to celebrate being free of all our worries." Free of all our worries. The words hit me like cold water. I represented a worry she was celebrating being free from. "Mom, when are you coming home? I need—" Joaquin. "Listen, sweetie, we're extending the trip indefinitely. This is exactly what I needed after all those years of being tied down. I have to go. We're meeting some wonderful people from Germany." The line went dead. Mrs. Henderson pretended to busy herself with washing dishes, but I could feel her watching me. As I stood frozen in her kitchen holding the receiver like it might somehow bring my mother back through sheer force of will. That night, lying on my bed in the stifling heat, I understood with crushing clarity that Patricia hadn't just left me physically. She'd abandoned me emotionally completely without looking back. The electric company's final notice arrived on day 8, a bright orange envelope that screamed its urgency even before I opened it. Power would be disconnected in 48 hours unless we paid $137. I stared at the number knowing I had exactly $0.17 in my pocket. When the electricity died 2 days later, our house transformed into a suffocating tomb. The July heat wave had settled over Chicago like a wet blanket, pushing temperatures into the upper 90s with humidity that made breathing feel like drowning. Without air conditioning or even electric fans, the indoor temperature climbed past 100 degrees by afternoon. I dragged a pillow and sheet onto our small front porch, sleeping under the stars, while neighbors' air conditioners hummed their mechanical lullabies. Mrs. Henderson's porch light cast long shadows across our yard, and I wondered if she watched me through her curtains debating whether to intervene. The $5 had evaporated after purchasing bread and peanut butter. By day 12, I'd eaten the last slice, scraping peanut butter from the jar, with my finger like some desperate animal. Hunger became a constant companion, a gnawing ache that made concentrating impossible. That's when I discovered the hidden economy of survival. Behind the Jewel grocery store on Cermak Road, I found dumpsters filled with slightly expired produce, day-old bakery items, and dented cans that couldn't be sold, but remained perfectly edible. The first time I climbed into that dumpster, shame burned hotter than the summer sun, but hunger won over pride, and I learned to time my visits for early morning before the garbage trucks arrived. Collecting aluminum cans became my daily occupation. I walked miles through neighborhoods searching garbage bins and recycling containers for anything worth the 5 cents per can that Sal's Recycling paid. On a good day, I could earn $3 or $4, enough for a McDonald's hamburger and small fries that felt like luxury dining. The public library became my sanctuary. The Cicero branch offered free air conditioning, clean bathrooms, and most importantly, no questions asked about why a teenage boy spent 8 hours daily reading magazines and using their computers. The building opened at 9 and closed at 8, giving me 11 blessed hours of comfort each day. Janet Wilson worked the information desk, a kind woman in her 50s with graying brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. She noticed me immediately, of course. Librarians notice everything. But instead of calling security or asking uncomfortable questions, she started offering subtle help. "Ernest, right?" she said after I'd been coming for a week. "I always pack way too much lunch. Would you like half this sandwich, turkey and Swiss fresh from home this morning?" Her kindness almost broke me. I accepted the sandwich, gratefully devouring it, while pretending to read a magazine about car restoration. Janet never made me feel like charity. She just happened to always pack too much food, according to her stories. Mrs. Henderson finally cornered me on day 15, appearing at our front gate as I returned from another fruitless day of can collecting. Her silver hair was perfectly styled despite the heat, and she wore a floral house dress that reminded me of my grandmother. "Ernest, sweetheart, where exactly is your mother?" I'd rehearsed this conversation, crafting explanations about Patricia working temporary positions at diners throughout the Chicago suburbs. The lies rolled off my tongue with practiced ease. And now she's covering shifts at a place in Naperville this week. The pay is really good, but the commute means she's staying with a friend near the restaurant. Mrs. Henderson's sharp blue eyes studied my face like she was reading a book. And when exactly is she coming back? Soon, I said the word hollow even to my own ears. Ernest, honey, I'm worried about you. If your mother doesn't come home soon, I'll have to call the Department of Children and Family Services. You understand that, don't you? Terror gripped me. Foster care meant separation from everything familiar placement with strangers who saw me as another mouth to feed. I'd heard horror stories from kids at school about bouncing between homes, never staying anywhere long enough to feel safe. Please don't, I begged, abandoning all pretense. She'll be back soon, I promise. I'm taking care of everything just fine. Mrs. Henderson's expression softened, but determination remained in her voice. One more week, Ernest. If Patricia doesn't come home in 1 week, I'm making that call. That evening, sitting on the porch as darkness fell across our neighborhood, I felt completely alone in the universe. Children's laughter drifted from nearby yards where families gathered for barbecues, their voices mixing with television sounds and air conditioners. Normal people living normal lives, never imagining that 15 feet away, an abandoned boy was counting down days until he lost what little independence he had left. The next morning brought a new catastrophe. Dave Kowalski's pickup truck pulled into our driveway at 7 a.m., his boots crunching across the gravel with purpose. Our landlord was a thick-set man in his 60s with calloused hands and permanently stained work clothes. He'd always been fair, but strict about rent payments. "Where's your mother, kid?" he asked, without preamble, holding a clipboard thick with official-looking papers. I started my rehearsed explanation about temporary work, but he cut me off with a wave. "Save it. I drove by Murphy's Diner yesterday. They haven't seen Patricia in 6 weeks. Now I'm going to ask again, where is your mother?" Faced with concrete evidence, my lies crumbled. "She's traveling. She'll be back soon." Dave's weathered face showed genuine sympathy, but business was business. "I'm sorry, Ernest, I really am. But I've got a mortgage on this place, and your mother owes me 3 months back rent plus late fees. Total comes to $1,800. He handed me the eviction notice, the paper official, and terrifying with its red stamps and legal language. "You've got 72 hours before the sheriff's department comes to remove any belongings left on the property." 72 hours, 3 days before I lost the only home I'd known since elementary school. I stared at the notice, the words swimming before my eyes, as the full magnitude of my situation crashed over me like a tsunami. I wasn't just abandoned anymore. I was about to become homeless. The eviction notice trembled in my hands as Dave Kowalski's truck disappeared down the street. $1,800 might as well have been $18 million. I had 67 cents in my pocket and no idea how to prevent the sheriff's deputies from physically removing me from our house in 3 days. That first night sleeping in the library parking lot, I understood what true helplessness felt like. I'd found a spot behind the building where tall bushes provided some concealment from the street. The asphalt still radiated heat from the day, and distant traffic created a constant white noise that reminded me how exposed I was to the world. Around 2 in the morning, a flashlight beam found me curled up with my pillow and sheet. I expected angry demands to move along, maybe threats to call police. Instead, a gentle voice asked, "You okay there, son?" Tom Williams stood above me, a stocky African-American man in his 40s wearing a security guard uniform. His badge identified him as working for Midwest Security Services, and his kind eyes showed none of the suspicion I'd anticipated. "I'm fine." I lied, sitting up and trying to look less pathetic than I felt. Tom studied me for a long moment, then unscrewed the cap from a thermos. "Coffee," he offered. Made it fresh at the start of my shift. The coffee was black and strong, warming me from the inside despite the summer heat. Tom settled onto a nearby bench, maintaining distance that felt respectful rather than threatening. "Mind me asking how old you are?" 15. I admitted seeing no point in lying to someone showing genuine concern. 15. Tom shook his head slowly. I was 16 when I first slept outside, aged out of foster care with nowhere to go, no family to fall back on. Scariest time of my life. Something in his voice made me look up from my coffee. Tom's face showed understanding that came from personal experience, not pity or judgment. What happened? I asked. Survived, he said simply. Learned that being homeless doesn't define you unless you let it. Some folks get knocked down and stay down. Others use it as fuel to build something stronger. Tom worked 3 jobs: security guard, at night warehouse loader during the day, and weekend maintenance for a small apartment complex. Every penny went toward supporting his disabled sister Monica, who lived in a subsidized apartment across town. Monica can't work because of her condition. He explained during our second conversation. Cerebral palsy affects her mobility, but not her mind. Sharpest woman I know. She's the reason I keep pushing forward. Over the following nights, Tom became my survival instructor. He showed me which 24-hour laundromats had the cleanest restrooms for washing up. He explained how to use a day pass at the YMCA for proper showers without arousing suspicion. Most importantly, he taught me about staying safe on the streets. Wayans, trust your instincts, he emphasized. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't accept rides from strangers, don't get involved in anything that seems too good to be true, and always have an exit strategy. Tom's lessons went beyond physical survival. He helped me understand that homelessness was temporary if I refused to let it become permanent. You've got 2 choices, Ernest. Let this situation break you down into someone who expects nothing from life, or use it to build strength most people never develop. I chose strength, but the decision felt fragile those first weeks. Sleeping outside made every sound terrifying, every approaching stranger a potential threat. I learned to wake at the slightest disturbance, ready to run or defend myself. Janet, the librarian, noticed my declining appearance, but never asked direct questions. Instead, she increased her food offerings, claiming even more elaborate explanations for her excess lunches. My sister visited last weekend and brought enough casserole to feed an army, she'd say, producing containers of homemade lasagna or chicken and rice. Would you mind helping me finish this? I hate throwing away good food. Her kindness kept me fed, but more importantly, it preserved my dignity. Janet treated me like a valued library patron who happened to appreciate home cooking, not a charity case requiring rescue. 3 weeks into my homelessness, while I was reading job listings on the library computers, Janet approached with unusual directness. Ernest, I need to tell you about an opportunity, she said quietly, glancing around to ensure we weren't overheard. My neighbor Sarah Martinez owns a landscaping company. She mentioned needing help with summer lawn maintenance. The work is hard outdoors in this heat, but it pays cash daily. My pulse quickened. Steady income could change everything, but I worried about my age and inexperience. Would she hire someone my age? Janet smiled. Sarah lost her father when she was young. She understands what it's like when life forces you to grow up fast. I can introduce you if you're interested. Hope felt dangerous after so much disappointment, but I couldn't afford to refuse opportunities. Yes, please, I'll do whatever work she needs. The next morning, Janet walked me 6 blocks to a small house with an immaculate yard and a pickup truck loaded with lawn equipment. Sarah Martinez emerged from her garage wearing work clothes and boots, her dark hair pulled back under a baseball cap. She was probably 35 with calloused hands and the efficient movements of someone who worked with their body for a living. You must be Ernest, she said, looking me over with the assessment of an experienced employer. Janet tells me you need work. I nodded, suddenly nervous about making a good impression. I'm not running a charity, Sarah continued bluntly. I need someone who shows up on time, works hard, and doesn't complain about getting dirty or sweaty. The pay is $20 per day cash paid immediately after each shift. Can you handle that? Yes, ma'am, I said, meaning it completely. We start at 6 a.m. to beat the heat. Bring work gloves if you have them and wear clothes you don't mind ruining. Tomorrow we're doing yard cleanup at a house in Oak Park. That evening I used 3 of my carefully hoarded dollars to buy work gloves at a hardware store closeout sale. For the first time in weeks, I fell asleep with something resembling optimism. The Oak Park house belonged to Robert Chen, a successful businessman whose property spoke of comfortable wealth. The lawn stretched like green carpet bordered by flower beds that required precision maintenance. Sarah assigned me to weeding, mulching, and trimming hedges while she handled the more skilled tasks. The work was back-breaking. July sun beat down mercilessly as I pulled weeds from flower beds and hauled wheelbarrows full of mulch. Sweat soaked through my clothes within an hour and my hands cramped from gripping tools. But the physical discomfort felt good somehow, like proof I was earning my survival through honest effort. During our lunch break, as Sarah and I sat in the shade drinking water from her cooler, I overheard conversation from inside the house. Robert Chen was talking to someone about his mother's care needs. "I don't know what to do anymore, Linda," he said, his voice carrying through an open window. "Mom's been through 6 different caregivers in 4 months. Either they steal from her, ignore her completely, or treat her like she's already dead. I'm paying good money, but I can't find anyone reliable." His wife's voice responded with sympathy. "Your mother deserves better, Robert. She was a teacher for 40 years. She's sharp as ever mentally. She just needs help with mobility since the hip replacement." "I know, but where do I find someone who actually cares about people, instead of just collecting a paycheck?" My pulse accelerated as I realized this conversation represented opportunity. Here was someone willing to pay good money for reliable help, and I desperately needed exactly that kind of steady income. But I was a 15-year-old high school dropout with no experience in elderly care and no references except a landscaper I'd known for 3 days. Still, as Tom Williams had taught me, survival sometimes required taking calculated risks. The worst Robert Chen could do was say no, leaving me exactly where I started. But if he said yes, the possibility of real stability, indoor work, and meaningful income sent electricity through my tired body. This could be the opportunity that changed everything. My hands shook as I approached the front door of Robert Chen's house, Sarah's encouraging nod giving me just enough courage to press the doorbell. The melodic chimes that echoed inside sounded expensive, reminding me how different this world was from anything I'd known. Robert Chen answered the door, looking slightly annoyed at the interruption. He was maybe 45, wearing a polo shirt and khakis that screamed suburban professional. His expression shifted to confusion when he saw a sweaty teenager in work clothes standing on his front porch. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Chen, my name is Ernest. I work for Sarah's landscaping company. I couldn't help overhearing you talking about needing help for your mother." The words tumbled out before fear could stop them. "I know this sounds crazy, but I'd like to apply for the position." Robert's eyebrows rose toward his hairline. "You want to apply for elderly care? How old are you?" 15. I said deciding honesty was my only possible strategy. "But I'm not asking you to hire me because I'm young. I'm asking you to consider me because I understand what it means to need reliable help, and I'll work harder than anyone else you could find." Something in my tone must have intrigued him because Robert stepped onto the porch, studying my face more carefully. "Why don't you tell me about your situation?" I took a deep breath and explained everything. My father's death, Patricia's abandonment, sleeping in parking lots, working whatever jobs I could find. I admitted having no formal experience with elderly care, but emphasized my willingness to learn and my desperate need for stability. "I won't steal from your mother and I won't treat her badly," I concluded. "Right now, this opportunity means the difference between having a chance at a real life and staying homeless. If you give me a trial period, I'll prove that I can be exactly the reliable help you're looking for." Robert listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Wait here," he said, finally disappearing into the house. I stood on his porch watching Sarah work in the flower beds and wondering if I'd just ruined any chance by being too forward. Maybe successful businessmen didn't want sob stories from desperate teenagers. The door opened again, and Robert emerged with an elderly woman using a walker. Grace Chen was maybe 80, with silver hair styled in elegant waves and alert eyes that missed nothing. Despite her mobility aid, she carried herself with unmistakable dignity. "What, so you're the young man who wants to help me?" she said, settling into a porch chair with careful precision. "Robert tells me you're 15 and homeless." "Yes, ma'am," I replied, unsure whether honesty had been a mistake. My late husband and I taught high school for 40 years combined," Grace continued. "We saw thousands of students, and we learned to recognize character. Tell me, Ernest, what do you think I need help with?" The question surprised me. I'd expected her to quiz me about experience or references. "From what I overheard, you need someone who respects your independence, while helping with things that are harder since your surgery. You don't want someone who treats you like you're incapable just because you move differently now." Grace smiled for the first time. "Very perceptive. What makes you think you could provide that kind of assistance?" "Because I understand what it feels like when people see your situation and assume you're helpless," I said. "I know the difference between needing help and being treated like you can't make your own decisions." Grace and Robert exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them before Grace turned back to me. "Here's what I propose. You'll come here every afternoon from 1 to 5 Monday through Friday. Your responsibilities will include grocery shopping, light housekeeping, meal preparation, and companionship. I'll pay you $15 per hour, plus a home-cooked meal each day. We'll try this arrangement for 2 weeks and see how it works. $15 per hour. $60 per day. $300 per week." The numbers seemed impossible after weeks of counting pennies and competing with pigeons for discarded French fries. "There are conditions," Grace continued. "First, you will treat me as an adult who happens to need assistance, not as an invalid who requires management. Second, you'll be honest with me about everything, including when you don't know how to do something. Third, you'll accept my guidance about life skills without arguing. Do you agree to these terms?" "Yes, ma'am," I said, hardly believing this was really happening. "Excellent. Can you start tomorrow?" That evening, I called Tom Williams from the library payphone to share my news. His excitement matched my own, but he also offered practical advice about making the arrangement work long-term. "Don't just be an employee," he counseled. "Be someone Grace looks forward to seeing each day. Remember, she's probably lonely. Most elderly folks are. Your company might be more valuable than any chores you do." Tom's wisdom proved accurate immediately. Grace Chen was incredibly sharp mentally, with stories spanning decades of teaching and observations about life that fascinated me. Our first week together involved grocery shopping at Jewel, where Grace taught me how to select fresh produce, compare unit prices, and plan meals around sales and nutrition. "Oh, never buy ingredients just because they're cheap," she explained while examining tomatoes. "Buy ingredients you'll actually use to make foods you'll actually eat. Wasting money on food that spoils is worse than spending slightly more on items you'll consume completely." Her kitchen became my classroom for practical life skills I'd never learned. Grace showed me how to balance a checkbook, create household budgets, and understand the true cost of different spending decisions. She explained health insurance credit scores and the importance of emergency savings in terms that made complex concepts clear. "Your mother never taught you these things?" she asked one afternoon as we organized her medication dispensers. "Why, Patricia was always working or exhausted," I explained. "We never had enough money for budgeting to matter much anyway." Grace's expression grew thoughtful. "Financial education isn't about having money, Ernest. It's about understanding how money works so you can make smart decisions when you do have it. The habits you build now will determine your entire financial future." During our second week together, Grace suggested I sleep on her living room couch instead of continuing to risk my safety in parking lots and abandoned buildings. Her house was clean, quiet, and safe with regular meals that helped me regain weight I'd lost during my worst weeks of homelessness. "This isn't charity," she insisted when I hesitated to accept her offer. "You're working hard, you're reliable, and you're excellent company. I enjoy having you here." Sarah's landscaping work continued in the mornings, giving me additional income and physical exercise that complemented my afternoon responsibilities with Grace. Between both jobs, I was earning more money than I'd ever imagined possible, enough to start saving for future goals instead of just surviving day to day. Janet, the librarian, helped me open my first bank account, explaining the importance of financial institutions and teaching me how to manage savings responsibly. Watching my account balance grow from zero to hundreds of dollars felt like magic. "You're building a foundation," Janet explained as we reviewed my first monthly statement. "Every dollar you save now represents future options and opportunities." The routine of working, saving, and learning gave my life structure it had never possessed. Grace's house became more than shelter. It became a genuine home where I felt valued and respected. For the first time since my father's death, an adult cared about my welfare without expecting anything in return except honest effort. Then 6 weeks into our arrangement, a postcard arrived that changed everything. The image showed the Eiffel Tower at sunset, romantic and beautiful. Patricia's handwriting on the back was cheerful and completely oblivious to my situation. "Having the time of my life in Paris, Marcus and I are extending our trip indefinitely because we're finally living our dream. The food is incredible. The people are wonderful. And for the first time in years, I feel truly free. Will call soon. Love, Mom." No phone number, no return address, no money, no acknowledgement that she'd abandoned her 15-year-old son with $5 and no support system. I stared at the postcard feeling a strange mixture of devastation and liberation. The fantasy that Patricia would return apologetic and ready to resume being my mother finally died completely. She wasn't coming back because she'd never intended to come back. But instead of the crushing despair I'd expected, I felt something unexpected relief. I no longer had to hope for rescue that would never arrive. I could stop making excuses for someone who'd chosen freedom over responsibility. Most importantly, I could focus entirely on building my own future without waiting for anyone else to provide it. That evening, Grace found me sitting on her back porch, staring at the postcard in my hands. "Bad news?" she asked gently. I showed her Patricia's message. Grace read it twice before setting it aside with a disgusted shake of her head. "I'm sorry, Ernest. You deserved much better from your mother." "I know," I said, surprised by my own calmness. "But maybe this is better in the long run. Now I know exactly where I stand." Grace studied my face carefully. "And where do you stand?" "Walk right here," I said, looking around her peaceful backyard. "Building something real with people who actually care about me." Grace's smile was warm and proud. "That's exactly right, dear. You're going to be just fine." For the first time since Patricia drove away in Marcus's red Camaro, I truly believed her. Grace Chen's network of elderly friends became my pathway to something I'd never imagined, running my own business at 16 years old. It started with Mrs. Dorothy Fleming, Grace's bridge partner, who needed help organizing her medications after a minor heart episode. "Grace tells me you're wonderful with practical matters," Mrs. Fleming said during my interview in her spotless living room. "I'm looking for someone to help with pill organization, light grocery shopping, and perhaps some companionship during my recovery." Mrs. Fleming lived in a senior apartment complex in Riverside, where many residents struggled with similar needs. Word spread quickly about the polite teenager who showed up on time, worked efficiently, and treated elderly clients with genuine respect. Within 3 weeks, I had 5 regular clients, each needing different combinations of services. Dr. Amanda Foster became my biggest advocate and unofficial business advisor. The retired physician had taught at Northwestern University Medical School for 30 years before moving to Grace's neighborhood. Her sharp mind and extensive professional network opened doors I couldn't have approached alone. Ernest, you're providing a legitimate service that fills a real market gap, she explained during one of our strategy conversations. Home healthcare agencies charge enormous fees but provide impersonal service. Family members love their elderly relatives but often lack time or skills for consistent care. You're offering personalized attention at reasonable rates. Dr. Foster helped me understand the legal and ethical requirements of working with vulnerable adults. She explained confidentiality rules, emergency procedures, and the importance of maintaining professional boundaries while building genuine relationships with clients. Never accept gifts of significant value, she warned. Always document any concerning changes in a client's health or mental state. And remember, your role is assistance and companionship, not medical care. Know when to recommend professional intervention. My client base expanded to include Colonel James Richardson, a Korean War veteran who needed help organizing his basement workshop, Mrs. Susan Kowalski, whose arthritis made grocery shopping painful, and Mr. William Foster, Dr. Foster's widowed brother-in-law, who craved intellectual conversation more than physical assistance. Each client taught me different skills. Colonel Richardson showed me basic home repair and maintenance skills that proved valuable when other clients needed similar help. Mrs. Kowalski, a former nurse, explained medical terminology and helped me understand common health issues affecting elderly people. Mr. Foster, a retired English teacher, corrected my grammar and expanded my vocabulary through discussions about literature and history. The emotional rewards matched the financial benefits. My clients weren't just income sources, they became surrogate family members who celebrated my successes and offered guidance during challenges. Their stories enriched my understanding of life resilience and the value of human connection. Grace insisted I continue my education despite working nearly full-time. We arranged for me to attend night school at Morton East High School, where I could complete my diploma while maintaining my business during regular daytime hours. Education is your insurance policy, Grace emphasized while helping me with algebra homework. No matter how successful your business becomes, you need that diploma as proof you can commit to long-term goals and handle academic challenges. Night school proved more difficult than regular high school, but my motivation was absolute. Every class completed brought me closer to legitimate credentials and expanded opportunities. My grades were excellent because I understood the connection between academic achievement and future success in ways my classmates couldn't appreciate. Managing 12 regular clients required organizational skills I developed through necessity. I created detailed schedules, maintained careful financial records, and invested in liability insurance after Dr. Foster explained the legal risks of service-based businesses. My weekly income reached $600 more than many adults in our neighborhood earned. The transformation felt surreal sometimes. 6 months earlier, I'd been digging through dumpsters and sleeping in parking lots. Now I had a thriving business, stable housing, and enough money to start planning for college. The contrast reminded me daily how dramatically life could change through determination and willingness to seize opportunities. But success also attracted unwanted attention. One evening in late November, as I returned to Grace's house, after visiting Colonel Richardson, a familiar red Camaro sat in her driveway. My stomach dropped as I recognized Marcus, leaning against the passenger door, smoking a cigarette and watching me with obvious calculation. "Well, well," he said, flicking ash onto Grace's pristine driveway. "Look who's all grown up and responsible now." Marcus appeared exactly the same slicked-back hair expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask the scent of cigarettes and clothes that cost more than he could afford. But something had changed in his demeanor. The smooth confidence I remembered was replaced by nervous energy that suggested desperation. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Arkin, your mother sent me to check on you," he said, though his eyes avoided direct contact. "She's worried about her little boy, wants to make sure you're handling things okay." The lie was transparent. Patricia had shown zero interest in my welfare for 5 months. If she was worried, she would have called or written letters with return addresses. "Where is she?" "Busy with important matters," Marcus replied vaguely. "The point is, she wants you to come home immediately. This little independence experiment is over." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Home to what? The house you helped her abandon, the utilities that got shut off, the eviction notice? Marcus's face darkened. "Don't get smart with me, kid. Patricia is your mother, and you'll do what she says. Pack your stuff and come with me right now." "No." The simple word hung between us like a challenge. Marcus straightened up, trying to use his adult size to intimidate me. But months of survival had taught me that physical presence meant nothing without actual authority. "I'm not asking Ernest, I'm telling you, get in the car." "And I'm telling you no. I don't live with Patricia anymore. I have my own life now." Before Marcus could respond, Grace's front door opened. She emerged wearing a robe and slippers, but her posture radiated authority that made Marcus step backward involuntarily. "Is there a problem here?" she asked crisply. Marcus attempted his old charm. "Just family business, ma'am. I'm here to collect Patricia's son." "Ernest is my guest and employee," Grace replied with ice in her voice. "He's also legally free to make his own decisions about where he lives and works. Unless you have court documents giving you custody or guardianship, I suggest you leave my property immediately." You can't keep a minor away from his mother." Marcus blustered, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Grace smiled with the confidence of someone who'd already consulted lawyers about exactly this situation. "Ernest isn't being kept anywhere. He's choosing to live here while working and attending school. If Patricia wants to discuss arrangements with her son, she's welcome to call and schedule a conversation like a responsible adult." Marcus realized he was outmaneuvered, but couldn't resist a parting threat. "This isn't over. Patricia's going to make things very difficult for everyone involved." As the Camaro disappeared down the street, Grace put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "I've been expecting something like this," she said calmly. "Dr. Foster helped me contact a family attorney about your situation. We've been working on legal protections to ensure your independence." That night, as we discussed emancipation proceedings over hot chocolate, I felt profound gratitude for the adults who'd chosen to support my growth rather than exploit my vulnerability. Unlike Patricia, who'd seen motherhood as a burden, to escape, these people invested in my future without expecting anything in return except my honest effort to succeed. Marcus's appearance had been unsettling, but it also clarified how completely my life had changed. I wasn't the desperate, abandoned boy he'd expected to intimidate into submission. I was a young businessman with income, education, legal protections, and a chosen family who respected my autonomy. Whatever Patricia and Marcus were planning, I was ready for them. The emancipation hearing took place on a cold January morning in Cook County Family Court. Grace, Dr. Foster, and Janet the librarian sat in the gallery behind me, their presence providing moral support as I faced the judge who would determine my legal future. Judge Patricia Hernandez reviewed my petition carefully, asking detailed questions about my income, living arrangements, and educational progress. I answered honestly, explaining how abandonment had forced me to develop self-sufficiency skills most teenagers never needed. "Your business generates approximately $600 per week," she asked, reviewing my financial records. "Yes, Your Honor. I provide companionship and assistance services to elderly clients throughout the western suburbs. Dr. Foster helped me obtain liability insurance and proper business licenses." Judge Hernandez turned to Grace, who served as my character witness. "Mrs. Chen, you're willing to continue housing Ernest until he turns 18? "Absolutely, Your Honor. Ernest has become like a grandson to me. He's respectful, responsible, and completely self-supporting. I consider myself fortunate to have him in my home." The judge's decision was swift and definitive. Petition for emancipation granted. Ernest, you're now legally independent with all the rights and responsibilities of an adult. Use this freedom wisely. Walking out of that courthouse felt like emerging from a cocoon. I was 16 years old and legally free to make every decision about my life without interference from anyone, including Patricia. The relief was overwhelming. With Grace's continued guidance, I formalized my elderly care business as Ernest's Assistance Services, obtaining proper tax identification numbers and business insurance. Dr. Foster connected me with social workers and case managers who referred additional clients, expanding my operation to include 15 regular customers. My educational progress accelerated through a combination of night school summer programs and independent study. Grace helped me prepare for college entrance exams, and my scores were high enough to attract attention from several universities. The idea of higher education impossible just months earlier became an achievable goal with clear steps for accomplishment. The business success attracted positive attention throughout the community. The Cicero Life newspaper featured my story as an example of youth resilience, describing how abandonment had motivated me to create legitimate employment for myself while serving elderly residents who needed reliable assistance. The article brought new clients and community recognition, but it also had an unintended consequence. It reached Patricia. On a warm April evening, as I finished helping Mrs. Kowalski organize her medication dispensers, I returned to Grace's house to find a familiar figure sitting on the front porch steps. Patricia looked exactly as I remembered, except for a deep tan and expensive clothes that seemed out of place with her surroundings. "Hello, Ernest," she said, standing as I approached. Her voice carried none of the guilt or apology I might have expected. Instead, she sounded almost casual, as if she'd seen me just last week, rather than abandoning me 9 months earlier. "Patricia?" I replied deliberately, using her first name instead of Mom. Her eyebrows rose at my formality, but she maintained her cheerful demeanor. "Look at you. You've grown so much, and that newspaper article made you sound like quite the businessman." I studied her face, searching for signs of genuine remorse or concern for the trauma her abandonment had caused. Finding none, I felt my last emotional attachment to her dissolve completely. "What do you want? Is that any way to greet your mother after all this time? I've missed you terribly." The lie was so transparent it almost amused me. "Have you? Because your postcard from Paris suggested you were feeling truly free for the first time in years." Patricia's smile flickered slightly. "That was just vacation excitement. Of course I missed my son." "Where's Marcus?" "Oh, we decided to go our separate ways," she said, waving dismissively. Men like that are never reliable long-term partners. Before I could respond, Grace appeared in the doorway, wearing her most formal expression. Patricia's confident demeanor shifted to uncertainty as she faced the woman who'd provided the stability she'd abandoned. "You must be Grace," Patricia said, attempting to reclaim control of the situation. "I'm Patricia Ernest's mother. I'm here to take him home." "Home to where?" Grace asked with polite curiosity. "Ernest mentioned your previous residence was lost to eviction." Patricia's jaw tightened. "We'll find a new place. The important thing is getting my family back together." "Your family?" I interrupted. "You mean the family you left with $5 and expired milk? The family you abandoned to chase some fantasy life in Europe?" "Ernest, honey, you're being dramatic. I went on one trip." "You blocked my phone number," I said, my voice rising despite my attempts to stay calm. "You never sent money, never called to check if I was alive or dead. You told Marcus you were celebrating being free of your worries. I was one of those worries, wasn't I?" Patricia's mask began slipping, revealing frustration beneath her artificial warmth. "You're 15 years old, you belong with your mother. This whole independence thing is ridiculous. I'm 16, legally emancipated, and I haven't been your responsibility for 9 months. You gave up any claim to being my mother when you chose Marcus over me." "I'm still your parent." "No," Grace interjected firmly. You're a woman who gave birth to Ernest but chose to abandon your parental responsibilities. Being a mother requires consistent care sacrifice and putting your child's welfare above your own desires. You've demonstrated none of those qualities. Patricia's composure cracked completely. You can't keep my son away from me? I have legal rights. Actually, you don't, Grace replied calmly. Ernest is legally emancipated, which means he makes his own decisions about relationships and living arrangements. You have no more legal authority over him than any other adult. The conversation was interrupted by a car door slamming. Marcus emerged from a battered Honda Civic that had seen much better days, his previous swagger replaced by obvious desperation. His expensive clothes from months earlier had been replaced by wrinkled khakis and a polo shirt that looked like it came from a discount store. Ernest, he called, approaching with forced enthusiasm. Good to see you again, kid. Your mother's been worried sick. I stared at both of them, finally understanding the real reason for their return. You're broke, aren't you? Patricia and Marcus exchanged guilty glances that confirmed my suspicion immediately. We've had some temporary setbacks, Patricia admitted reluctantly. What kind of setbacks? Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. The European economy is very challenging right now. Some investments didn't work out as planned. He gambled away everything we had. Patricia burst out, abandoning their united front. Monaco, Monte Carlo, every casino between France and Italy. We lost it all and had to sell everything just to buy plane tickets home. Patricia, Marcus hissed, but the damage was done. I looked between them, seeing clearly for the first time. They hadn't returned because they missed me or realized their mistake. They'd come back because they needed money and expected to find the same desperate, dependent teenager they'd abandoned. Instead, they'd discovered I'd not only survived, but thrived building income and independence that exceeded their own. The irony was perfect. The child they'd abandoned for financial freedom had achieved exactly what they'd failed to find. So what's the plan now? I asked. Move back into the house that was foreclosed, live off the money I earn, helping elderly people. Solter. Patricia's expression turned calculating. Your family, Ernest. Family helps each other during difficult times. Family doesn't abandon 15-year-old children with $5. I made a mistake, she said, finally, showing something approaching genuine emotion. I was overwhelmed, confused by grief over your father. Marcus promised me a new start, and I thought, you thought what? That I'd be fine on my own, that I didn't need a mother anymore. Tears appeared in Patricia's eyes, but I felt nothing except cold clarity. I was wrong. I see that now. But we can start over, be a real family again. I shook my head slowly. No, Patricia, we can't. You had a choice between responsibility and selfishness. And you chose selfishness. I've spent 9 months learning to live without you, and I'm better off this way. Marcus stepped forward aggressively. Listen, kid, your mother made some mistakes, but you owe her respect. She raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head. With what money? I shot back. My father's life insurance, the Social Security survivor benefits that were supposed to support his child. How much of that money paid for your European vacation? Marcus's face reddened, but he had no answer. Grace moved to stand beside me, her presence radiating support and protection. I think this conversation is over. Ernest has made his position clear, and you've both revealed your true motivations. It's time for you to leave. Patricia made one last desperate appeal. Ernest, please, I'm your mother. I love you. If you loved me, you wouldn't have left, I said simply. And you wouldn't have come back only because you need money. As they walked toward their broken-down Honda, Patricia turned back with genuine desperation in her voice. What am I supposed to do now? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Here was my chance for revenge, to tell her exactly what I thought about her choices and their consequences. Instead, I felt only sadness for the woman who'd chosen so poorly that she'd lost her own son's respect permanently. I don't know, Patricia, I said quietly, but it's not my problem anymore. The Honda disappeared down Grace's street, taking with it the last remnants of my childhood and any lingering hope for reconciliation. I felt no triumph in their defeat, only relief that the confrontation was finally over. That evening, Grace and I sat in her kitchen, sharing tea and reflecting on the day's events. "How do you feel?" she asked gently. "And free," I said, surprised by the truth of it. "For the first time since Dad died, I feel completely free." Grace smiled with maternal pride. "You handled that beautifully, Ernest. You showed strength without cruelty, honesty without hatred. Your father would be very proud of the man you're becoming." Looking around Grace's warm kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of the life I'd built, through determination and the kindness of chosen family, I realized Patricia had given me something valuable, after all. Her abandonment had forced me to discover strengths I never would have developed in a traditional family structure. I wasn't the victim of her choices anymore. I was the author of my own story, and it was going to have a much better ending than anything she could have written for me. The weeks following Patricia and Marcus's departure brought a peace I'd never experienced. Spring bloomed across Chicagoland, and my business continued growing as word spread about the reliable teenager who provided exceptional elderly care. Mrs. Fleming referred her neighbor, Mr. Thompson. Colonel Richardson recommended me to 3 veterans from his VFW post. My client list reached 20 regular customers, generating income that exceeded many college graduates' starting salaries. Grace helped me understand the magnitude of my achievement. Most adults struggle to build successful businesses. She pointed out during one of our evening conversations, "You've created something sustainable while maintaining excellent grades and preparing for college. That level of success requires remarkable maturity and determination." Dr. Foster assisted with my college applications, helping me craft essays that explained my unique circumstances without requesting pity. Northwestern University offered me early admission with a substantial scholarship recognizing both my academic potential and the leadership skills demonstrated through my business success. "You've proven you can overcome adversity and create value for others," the admissions counselor explained during my campus visit. "Those qualities matter more than traditional extracurricular activities." I plan to study social work inspired by my experiences with elderly clients and my desire to help other young people navigate family crises. Tom Williams, who'd become a mentor and friend, supported my educational goals while helping me plan the transition of my business to trusted employees. "You're not abandoning your clients," he assured me when I worried about leaving for college. "You're building something bigger by getting the education that will let you help people on a larger scale." Life felt stable and promising until early June when Patricia and Marcus reappeared at Grace's front door. This time they looked desperate rather than merely broke. Patricia's expensive clothes had been replaced by discount store outfits, and Marcus's confident swagger was gone entirely. "Ernest, please just hear us out," Patricia pleaded before I could close the door. "We need to talk to you about something important." Against my better judgment, I allowed them into Grace's living room. Grace insisted on being present, concerned about their intentions and my emotional welfare. "We're in serious trouble," Patricia began without preamble. "We owe money to some very dangerous people and we need help immediately." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the room like he expected threats to materialize from the shadows. "The gambling debts followed us back from Europe. These aren't the kind of people you can ignore or negotiate with." I stared at them, both feeling a mixture of disbelief and dark amusement. "So you want me to bail you out of the mess you created by abandoning me? You're doing well for yourself," Patricia said desperately. "That newspaper article mentioned you're making good money and you're living here rent-free. You could help us get back on our feet." "How much money are we talking about?" Marcus cleared his throat nervously. $15,000. The number hung in the air like a toxic cloud. $15,000 represented months of careful saving money I'd planned to use for college expenses and business expansion. They were asking me to sacrifice my entire future to pay for their irresponsible choices. "You're joking," I said flatly. "Ernest, I know I made mistakes." Patricia continued, tears streaming down her face. "But if we don't pay this money, they're going to hurt us. Really hurt us. You're the only family I have left. I stopped being your family when you drove away with $5 and a promise to send money that never came." Grace spoke up for the first time since their arrival. "Patricia, what you're describing sounds like a problem for law enforcement, not a teenage boy trying to build his future." Marcus shook his head violently. "We can't go to police. These people have connections, and involving cops would just make things worse." I studied their faces, seeing genuine terror beneath the desperation. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy for their situation, but a larger part recognized the pattern of poor decisions that had led them to this moment. Why should I sacrifice my college fund for people who abandoned me when I needed help? "Because I'm your mother," Patricia whispered. "Because despite everything, you're a good person who wouldn't want to see me hurt." She was right about one thing: I was a good person, largely because of the people who'd supported me after she left. Grace, Dr. Foster, Tom Williams, and Janet had taught me about responsibility, compassion, and helping others. But they'd also taught me about boundaries and the difference between helping someone and enabling their destructive behavior. "I'll make you a deal," I said, after a long moment of consideration. "I'll give you enough money for bus tickets to anywhere in the country you want to go, plus first month's rent and security deposit for a modest apartment. That's about $2,000 total." Patricia's face lit up with desperate hope, but I held up my hand before she could respond. "In exchange, you both sign legal documents promising never to contact me again. No phone calls, no letters, no unexpected visits. You disappear from my life permanently." Marcus started to object, but Patricia silenced him with a sharp look. "What about the people we owe money to? It's your problem to solve. You can use the fresh start I'm offering to rebuild your lives somewhere else, or you can stay here and face the consequences of your choices, but you won't solve your problems by draining my resources." Grace nodded approvingly at my proposal. "That's more than generous considering the circumstances." Patricia looked between Marcus and me, clearly torn between accepting my offer and pushing for more money. Finally, practical fear won over greed. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll take your offer." The next morning, Dr. Foster's attorney drew up the necessary paperwork while I withdrew $2,000 from my carefully built savings account. The money represented months of hard work and sacrificed luxuries, but buying permanent freedom from Patricia and Marcus was worth the cost. As they prepared to leave for a bus station in downtown Chicago, Patricia made one final attempt at emotional manipulation. "I really do love you, Ernest. I hope someday you'll forgive me." I looked at the woman who'd given birth to me, but never learned to be a mother, feeling something closer to pity than anger. "I already have forgiven you, Patricia. That's why I'm helping you leave safely, instead of letting you face the consequences of your choices alone. But forgiveness doesn't mean I trust you or want you in my life." She nodded through fresh tears, finally understanding that our relationship was truly over. After their taxi disappeared toward the city, Grace and I stood on her front porch, watching neighborhood children play in their yards. Normal families doing normal things, the kind of stability I'd never experienced, until finding it with chosen family, rather than biological connections. "Do you think they'll actually disappear?" Grace asked. "Yes," I said with certainty. "They're too scared of their creditors to risk staying in Chicago, and they know I won't give them more money. They'll start over somewhere else and hopefully make better choices." "And if they don't?" I shrugged. "That's not my responsibility anymore." That fall, I started at Northwestern University while maintaining a scaled-back version of my elderly care business. Grace remained my surrogate grandmother and closest family member. Dr. Foster continued mentoring my academic progress. Tom Williams and Janet celebrated each milestone in my education and career development. By my junior year, I'd expanded my focus to include policy work aimed at improving services for abandoned or neglected youth. My personal experience gave me credibility with lawmakers and social workers who recognized the need for better support systems. During graduate school, I developed a nonprofit organization that provides emergency assistance and mentorship to teenagers aging out of foster care or dealing with family abandonment. The program combines immediate practical support with long-term relationship building based on my understanding that young people need both resources and genuine human connection to thrive. Grace lived to see me graduate with my master's degree in social work, though she passed away peacefully the following winter. Her funeral was attended by dozens of former students, elderly clients I'd served, and young people whose lives had been improved through our nonprofit work. She'd created a legacy of service that extended far beyond her own lifetime. I never heard from Patricia or Marcus again, though I occasionally wondered whether they'd found the fresh start my money had purchased for them. I hoped they had not because I felt any lingering obligation, but because everyone deserves the chance to learn from their mistakes and build better lives. Looking back on those transformative months, I realized Patricia gave me something valuable. Despite her abandonment, the opportunity to discover strengths I never would have developed in a traditional family structure. Her departure forced me to build resilience, self-reliance, and the ability to recognize genuine care when offered by unexpected sources. The greatest lesson wasn't about survival or business success, though those skills proved valuable throughout my life. The real education was about the difference between biological family and chosen family, between people who share your genetics and people who share your values. Grace, Dr. Foster, Tom, Janet, and countless elderly clients became my real family because they chose to invest in my growth without expecting anything in return except honest effort and mutual respect. They taught me that love is demonstrated through consistent actions, not proclaimed through words or assumed through blood relations. Today, when I work with young people facing family crises, I share this truth. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for the best life you could have imagined. Abandonment taught me independence. Homelessness taught me gratitude. Struggle taught me strength. Most importantly, being rejected by someone who should have loved me unconditionally taught me to recognize authentic love when it appeared in unexpected forms. That recognition has made all the difference in building relationships, career success, and personal happiness. Patricia thought she was choosing freedom when she drove away that July morning. What she actually did was give me the greatest gift possible, the chance to build a life surrounded by people who choose to love me every single day, rather than people who consider me an obligation to endure. For anyone facing similar abandonment or family rejection, remember this: the people who leave you weren't meant to stay, and the people meant to stay will find you when you're ready to receive their love. Your biological family's failure to value you says nothing about your worth and everything about their limitations. Build your own family from people who demonstrate through actions that they want the best for you. Invest in relationships that energize rather than drain you. Create the stability you wished someone else had provided. Most importantly, use your struggles as motivation to help others facing similar challenges. The pain you've survived can become the foundation for compassion that changes other people's lives. That transformation turns your suffering into purpose and your survival into service. That's how you win against abandonment, not by getting revenge or proving your worth to people who couldn't recognize it, but by building something so beautiful from the wreckage that you become grateful for every experience that led you to where you belong. The real victory isn't surviving what breaks other people. It's using that survival to ensure other people don't have to break the same way you did. Have you ever had to build your own family from people who chose to love you rather than people who shared your blood? What advice would you give to someone facing abandonment or family rejection? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this story if it resonated with your own experiences. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's greatest challenges and finding strength you never knew you possessed. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that their current struggles might be preparing them for their greatest victories. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the people who leave you are doing you the greatest favor possible by making room for the people who will truly appreciate having you in their lives. Your chosen family is waiting for you to find them.